Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Rossi. Today we're going to start our patterned hand project. What you will be needing today is your patterned hand paper from your art folder, a small piece of white paper, and then a larger piece of white paper that is double the size. So if I were to fold this in half, it would be the same size as my smaller paper. So you need those two pieces of paper. It should be labeled patterned hand in your art folder. You're also going to need a pencil, an eraser, something to trace with. You can use a marker or you can use a dark colored pencil or a pen. I have a regular Sharpie and a skinny Sharpie, and I might use both, I'm not sure yet. And then we're going to need something to color with. I'm going to use some markers and I'm going to show you how we can turn them into watercolor paint. If you have watercolors at home, you can just use that. If you don't have watercolors and you don't have washable markers to use for our watercolor paint, then you can just use crayons or regular markers or whatever else you would like to color in our background paper. Since I want to turn my markers into watercolor paint, I also have a cup with some water and a paintbrush. So the first thing I'm going to start with is my smaller piece of paper. So I'm going to put my larger one to the side. And I'm going to grab my pencil and my Sharpies that I'm going to use to trace. So on my small piece of paper, I'm going to create a pattern. Now we know that a pattern is when the elements and principles of art are repeating. So when you have repeating lines, shapes, colors, or textures, and it can be just lines that are repeating, just colors, just shapes, or they can be all mixed together to create the patterns. So you just want to create a repeating design with lines, shape, colors, and or texture. So you have a couple choices when you're making your pattern. Our pattern is going to cover our entire piece of paper. I think it's a little easier if you just go straight in with your marker or your pen or whatever you want to use to trace. But if you're afraid you're going to make a mistake, you can go in and start drawing your pattern with your pencil. I'm just going to go straight in with my Sharpies to create my pattern, but like I said, you can use your pencil. And I'm going to create a pattern that uses different kinds of lines and creates almost like a Zentangle design. Now your pattern can be whatever you would like it to be. If you want to create a pattern using shapes and lines or shapes and color, it's totally up to you. Now, whatever color we choose for our pattern paper, we're not going to use on our larger paper. So I'm going to use black to create my pattern, and it's just going to be black and white, and then I'll be able to use all of the other colors on my other piece of paper. So you can use a different color if you'd like, but you'll just have to remember that you cannot use that color when we use our larger paper later on. So the pattern that I'm going to create is going to use a mix of lines and shapes. Now your pattern can be whatever you would like it to be. If you don't know where to start, I have a video on Canvas that you can watch that shows how to make a bunch of different mini patterns. So I put a dot in the center of my page, and I'm going to have my pattern coming out from each of the sides of my paper towards the center. So I'm going to have 4 different little sections of my pattern that help make it up. And I'm just going to go straight in with my Sharpie. I think I'm going to go with my skinny Sharpie. If I do make a mistake with this one, it's a little easier to cover it up. So I'm going to go from the corner up towards my dot and then back down. Now you can make your pattern look like whatever you want it to look like. It does not have to look like mine. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. This time I'm going to touch the dot and bring it back down to the other corner. And then I'm going to do it again over here. That one didn't make it to the corner, but that's not a big deal. It does not have to be perfect. Now I'm going to keep making that shape over and over again, repeating that shape, leaving some space in between. I'm going to do that in all of the different sections. Now that I have finished my pattern using lines, I have repeating lines all over my paper, I'm going to add some color to create some pattern with color also. So I'm going to use color by coloring in some of my stripes in a repeating way so it enhances my pattern. So I'm just going to go over some of my rows with my thicker Sharpie to fill those in and make my pattern a little bit more interesting. So I think I'm going to do every third row I will color in with my Sharpie. So that will be, I'm going to skip 2 and then color that one, skip 2, color that one, skip 2, skip 2, skip 2, that one's getting colored, that's a little one. There we go. So I'm just going to color those in each section. So now I have my pattern finished with my lines and my color by using repeating lines and the repeating black color, but we can get a little crazier than this. So I'm going to go in, and in some of my stripes, I'm going to add some dots going all the way through to add some shape to my pattern as well. And that is my patterned paper all finished. So I started out just creating a pattern using repeating lines. Then I colored some of those line sections in black to create an additional pattern using color. And I even added some little circles inside some of my stripes now to include shape in my pattern as well. You don't have to include all of those different elements of art in your patterns, but you do want to create an interesting looking design that fills in most of your paper. So I don't have a lot of white space left, and my pattern is very dominant on the paper. It is taking up a lot of that paper. So that's what you are looking for when making your pattern for your small piece. But now that I'm done with this, I'm going to put it to the side, and I'm going to grab my larger white paper and start to add color on that one. So this paper is going to be our background paper for our project. So you can design this paper however you would like. I think I'm going to give mine like a tie-dye effect with a bunch of different colors. So like I said before, since I used black on my first smaller paper, I'm not going to use any black on here. We want this to be different colors than what you've already used. So if you use any colors in your patterns, those colors cannot go on your background paper. I'm just going to pick all the colors from the rainbow from my markers and use these to create a tie-dyed background. Now I'm going to turn my markers into watercolor paint today. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to color some blobs of color on here with my markers, and then I'm going to paint over the top with my water. And that is going to cause the markers to spread and mix together since they are washable. When they do get wet, they start to bleed together. And that is going to create a cool tie-dye effect on my paper. So now when I'm coloring my paper with my markers, since I am going to go over the top with the water, it does not have to be perfect. You want to make sure your color is pretty dark on there so that it can spread out easily. But you don't need to fill in all the white space because once the water is on there, it will mix in and fill in all those little white gaps later on, so you don't really have to worry about it being perfect. So I'm going to fill in this paper with my markers, and then I will add some water on top. Now, if you're using watercolor paints and you have your own watercolor paints at home, you can just paint any kind of design in your background. You should try and make it a little different than what you already made on your smaller paper, but you can create any kind of design on there with your different colors. And if you don't have washable markers and you don't have watercolor paint, you can just color in the background with whatever you have at home to color with. So you can color it in with crayons, you can use colored pencils, whatever you got will be fine. Now I'm going to take my water and a big brush, and I'm just going to paint my water on top of my marker to let those colors blend together. Now I don't want to just go across the entire paper because then it's going to get really muddy and all the colors are going to mix into like brown. So I'm only going to go in certain spots slowly at a time, making sure I'm just filling in all those little white spaces and letting my colors spread out and blend together a bit. I'm going to let this paper dry and I'm going to save it in my art folder with my other smaller patterned paper so we can finish our project next week. You do not have to submit any photos or videos as an assignment this week. You're just going to save both of your papers in your art folder so we can finish it together next time. Try your best, have fun, and get creative. I'll see you next week. Bye!